Good day. This is your friend, Emeritus Professor Stephen Adei. We are still on leadership for everyone, everywhere. And our sub-team now is organizational leadership. Today, I want to bring out a very important aspect of leadership. That leadership, the leadership process. How does the leadership manifest itself in a day-to-day organization? And in that regard, I want to say that one of the authors, including one of the later one, Organizational Leadership by Branton, Grant, and Nelson, emphasize, and I fully agree with them, that leadership is a process. It's not an act. You go and lead. You get people there, give them command, and then it is done. No, it is a process. And that leadership process always has three elements in view. And interestingly, much of those of us who are students of leadership, much of the literature often focus on one of the three coordinates of the leadership process. By leadership process, I mean it's an interaction between the one at the head or in front as a leader, their followers, and the context. And it's very, very important. If you miss this, you are likely to fail. For example, let me start with the context. I've had opportunity to be a primary school teacher, to be a teacher in the classroom, the university, to be a rector or vice chancellor. So educational leadership will share many of the things I've been saying about the need for vision, strategies, mobilization, but it's totally different. For example, in the university, you are dealing with primus inter pares. By my being rector, I have other professors, and they are also specialists in their areas, and leading them is different. When I was a diplomat, basically the head of the UN system in South Africa and Namibia, leading in a diplomatic context is totally different. You are dealing with government officials. Even, you cannot be in the classroom pampering. You say your mind and go. Your Excellency, even if you don't believe that the person is excellent. The context to succeed in the leadership is different. Again, we've talked about family leadership. In organization, you must be very careful that you notice the context in which you are leading. Currently, I chair several organizations, and they are as different as day and night. I'm the council chair of a university college. When I sit among the council chair, as a council chair, I'm dealing with the chairman will say, co-equals. Some of them, academically, yes, we are all professors, but there are, organ and organ kwata. Some professors beat you. So you are moderating them. When I go to Ghana Christian International High School, yes, the teachers are specialists, but the distance between me and the average teacher is quite distant. They are normally the typical followers whom you have to then bring up. I am a board member of a bank, and the people who are members of the board of the bank have come from various areas. The ethos of the bank is quite different. In fact, the workers in the banks think that the institutions belong to them, not to shareholders. If at the end of the year something is left, shareholders, you can be given bonus. But if you are in a factory, productivity, profitability, return to, especially if it's listed on the stock market, every day somebody is looking at the results Is your share prices going down or not? When MTN publishes its accounts, immediately everybody who has a share is seeing, hey, what's coming? What's going to be the dividend rate? Oh, and of course, later on, we'll be talking about community and political leadership. If you are not careful about your contest, and now even the global contest, you are going to be in trouble. I know that many universities and teachers are now out of debt because of AI, because the student has the same source of information as you, the teacher. Actually, the teacher's function has changed. Yours is to help them to interpret the data, help them to analyze it, and help them to absorb knowledge, because now the children, by going to the social media, are not learning. Their mind is not being exercised. You press something, and if we don't, we are going to have a generation of zombies. Therefore, the contest is important. That is what SWOT analysis is all about. You do the SWOT analysis to see the context in which you are operating. And one of the leadership gurus, Blanchard, developed a theory based on that, what he called situational leadership. Even though his had to do with followers, it applies also to the context. Therefore, there's a constant interaction, a process, that is exchanges between the leader and the process and the context. In organization also, there are the workers. And most organizations, however flat is the organization, is hierarchical. The manager, the CEO, the manager, the supervisors, and the rest. And if you are not careful, you talk about motivating your staff, you are not going to be able to go down and then relate every day to that of, say, a security man or a laborer. If you are at the top, of course, you can devise other means like darebers to interact with them. But you have to learn how to set up teams, motivate teams, and allow team leadership to work. What Blanchard says about followers has to do with that you must temper your leadership style to suit follower maturity. The more mature they are, the more you delegate to them. The less mature, the more you direct them. And then there's, of course, a continuum in between. And the leadership process involves not only the context, the followers, but the leader himself. How your leadership styles, which we'll be talking about in later sessions, matter. People, for example, tend to focus more on the work process, and they become failures as leaders because they don't focus on people. Leadership is about leading people. You don't lead processes. And the leadership characteristic, their integrity, credibility, people's trust in you make all the difference. I always say that often the leader's character, integrity, trustworthiness, as well as their knowledge and skills. And here, knowledge, we are not talking so much about accounting knowledge or engineering knowledge or medical knowledge. In fact, one of the banes of public organizations in Ghana is that the specialist, the top specialist, often becomes the manager. No. In other organizations, a top doctor, you ask him to be the medical director. He says, no, I'm not interested in becoming a medical director. I want to be a surgeon. I want to be a pediatrician. Of course, they will pay him, and he may earn more even than the managing director. But we have associated the hierarchy with salary. So the man at the top or the woman at the top gets the better conditions and everything else. But I'm talking about leadership and managerial capacity. And you need that within the leader. And of course, the leader's relationship with people. The interesting part of it is that in that process, the leader, the context, and the followers, it is dynamic. Dynamic. One cannot say that I've settled it, I've given instructions, blah, 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 we are finished. Let's move on. No. Every day, the leader must be watching. And I like to Harvard professors, Hefsa and I've forgotten the other name. He says that a leader is like somebody who has organized a ballet dancing floor. He may be dancing with other people, but every now and then, he has to go up to the balcony to look into the dancing floor because he is the overall director of what is going down there. And it's so important. And that is where one of the literature says a leader must be a high self-monitor. In other words, you are with them, but you are not the same as them. And it's so important that the leader must understand the leadership, his own leadership characteristics, his styles, must be intentional about it, must know the context, and must know his followers, so that he knows where to place people, how to encourage them, and hold them so that together they achieve more. The importance of the leadership, while there are three coordinates, the leader, the context, and the followers, they are not the same. The leader is the catalyst. And the importance of leadership is that often they are the maybe one person, but the major determinant of productivity, even on the factory floor. In fact, one of the gurus of societal leadership, Miles Monroe, says that, and though he was talking about a nation, I find his statement very, very, very important and relevant to organizational leadership, and I will quote and then apply it. He says, whenever a nation has a lack of quality, legitimate, and just leaders, national deterioration occurs. Quality leadership is the key to prosperous and peaceful life and nation. It is obvious that our nations are painfully in need of such leaders. And the mind-boggling statement he makes is this: our youth are begging for leaders. God's answer to all our social, moral, and economic problems is qualified and righteous leaders. I'm quoting from Miles Monroe in his book, Becoming a Leader, Newman Life Publishing, Bakersfield, in 1996. When it comes to the company, which we are dealing with organizational leadership, we could as well say that whenever a company has a lack of quality, legitimate, and just leaders, corporate deterioration occurs. Quality leadership is the key to prosperous companies. And it's amazing how organizations which may be dysfunctional change their leadership, and in no time we see progress. And yet at the same time, on the contrary, some organizations gets a name, gets good products to the market, there's a change in leadership, and very soon we see deterioration. And that is why I say leadership is cause. Everything else is effect. Let me conclude by saying that some of the marks of good leaders who are able to catalyze the leadership process so that the outcome becomes great and often explosive. First of all, such leaders, good leaders, tend to have a sense of purpose. They know where they are going, and they know how to get there, and they know how to carry people along there. A sense of purpose. Since leadership is about leading people, good leaders tend to be good in communication. And here, I'm not talking about mafu, talking well and, good English, good tree, and that. No. They are able to communicate meaning, to touch the hearts of people. Like Nehemiah, he comes from Babylon, sees a ruined Jerusalem. People have been there for decades or 70 years plus. Of course, the people could have done something. Nobody did anything. He comes and says, let us rise and build, so that the reproach, the disgrace of our nation will be taken away. And in a matter of days, Jerusalem's wall were rebuilt by the same people, communicating meaning, touching the heart of people, exciting them to rise. Because another quality has to do with integrity and trust. He had to generate trust in the people. And such leaders themselves tend to have high energy, discipline, decisive, and almost impatient with remaining at the same level. And later on, we'll be talking about leadership styles. They tend to be transformational, selfless, and promote the common good. We will meet again and we will look at leadership styles, the type of differences. And here, let me say up front that not one leadership style is super. Good leaders borrow from leadership styles, but they tend to have one dominant leadership characteristic, and that the literature calls transformative or transformational leaders. Shalom, and we will meet again when we look at leadership, corporate leadership styles. It is once again your brother and friend Emeritus Professor Stephen Adei on ZFM 101.9. And when you miss it, still meet me on my YouTube, Emeritus Professor Stephen Adei, and we will continue our corporate leadership. Shalom, and the Lord be with you.